Before we kick things off, I've got two quick things for you. First, do you want to push real innovation and help spark the uncomfortable but necessary conversations in the concrete industry? Support this show. When you donate, we list you as a producer of the episode because you're literally making these conversations happen. Go to concretelogicpodcast.com/donate and back the show today. Second, for a limited time, you can get free access to the Concrete Logic Academy. Take your first class on us, earn a PDH credit, and stick around for the networking and resources you won't find anywhere else in the industry. Claim your free trial now at concretelogicpodcast.com/academy. All right, let's get into today's episode.
What's the most used man-made material on Earth? I'll give you the answer. Concrete. This is the Concrete Logic Podcast. Have you ever stopped to think about the sidewalks, driveways, bridges, or the buildings around you? They're all made from concrete. So why don't we discuss it more? In each episode of Concrete Logic, we'll explore a unique concrete-related topic with the help of industry professionals shaping the trade's future. We'll talk with suppliers, contractors, architects, engineers, specialists, and even proponents of competing materials. We'll get their views on concrete and their visions for its future. So get ready to mix things up with Concrete Logic, where we turn the spotlight on the material that's everywhere but often overlooked. This is the Concrete Logic Podcast. And now, here's your host, Seth Tandett.
And welcome to another episode of the Concrete Logic Podcast. And today I have Concrete Bob Higgins with me, and we're going to talk about, well, for once I'm kind of planning ahead here. This is going to be episode 133. We're going to call it Concrete Climate and the Missing Science of Evaporation. Bob sent me an interesting email, as he always does, and about this MIT, what do you call those, papers?
Yes, yeah, study and an article.
So don't stop listening yet. This is going to be good. I know this previous episode, I did a solo episode about another paper about our favorite subject, PLC or Type 1L cement. This one's going to be great. This episode, we're going to talk about a paper that MIT researchers discovered that evaporation is not necessarily caused by heat. It's they believe it's caused by, it can be light driven. So Bob's joining us today, and we're going to talk about what is in this paper and how that relates to concrete and the implications of such a study. Does that sound good, Bob?
Sounds great.
All right, there we go. It's like we've done this before. All right, so I'm going to share my screen for folks watching on YouTube. If you're listening to the episode, we will explain what we're talking about. You're not missing out on it a whole lot. We're just looking at a very basic PowerPoint here. So why this episode? Again, I shared with you, Bob sent me an email. It had this paper in it. These MIT researchers discovered light-driven evaporation. This paper was accepted back in 2024. The article suggests that larger implications, beyond concrete. This will have impacts on the climate models that we use for climate change. And then, like I said, Bob's going to connect this to the concrete, and maybe we'll talk about some curing too. Bob, you want to go ahead and talk about this MIT discovery?
Yeah, when I came across this, I felt vindicated because a few years back, I was discussing freeze-thaw damage in concrete, and I asked about sublimation, and they were, what's that got to do with freeze-thaw damage? I said, sublimation is when water in its solid form can go directly to a vapor form and not go from the traditional solid to liquid to vapor. And they kind of dismissed that. And I said that I think that has an important impact on concrete durability, testing, and everything else. So when this came out, I was pretty happy because again, this is like another 20-year vindication only took 20 years this time. But sublimation, again, is when water goes from a solid to a vapor form. However, this is really interesting. They're finding now that light alone, there doesn't have to be heat to create evaporation. Now, there has been discussion in the past, and I've read articles that were left open, and there was no conclusion brought into the studies where they could see that exposure to sunlight was damaging the concrete, but they didn't know why. This helps explain that, because if the water's evaporating caused by light, that really puts a new wrinkle into all of this, because now we're looking at something that's affecting the curing process of concrete. Yeah. So in my opinion, this really emphasizes why we need to move towards self-curing concrete. Because if you've got the water buried in the concrete and not directly exposed to sunlight, and it filters its way to the surface, that's going to slow the process down. It's going to interrupt that process. So and it's interesting because even when they're using these what they call super absorbent polymers and these ethylene-based materials that they're putting in concrete, that seems to be making the concrete stronger. If they would get away from the carbon-based materials and start going towards things more like colloidal silica, which can become a component of the concrete rather than a material that will break down and decompose, and we don't know what the decomposition materials are going to do to the concrete in either mid or long term. That's the way things should move, and we should go more and more towards inorganics. And I don't know why they're staying with the organics. I guess it's because it's easier to study, but easier doesn't make the product better.
Yeah. Well, before we jump into how this relates to concrete, let's talk about what this MIT paper is saying.
Okay.
So,
yeah,
if you can explain, I think everybody understands what we think how evaporation happens. So let's talk about what we all think what it is now, and what this MIT thing is saying that is a possibility.
Okay. Evaporation is normally linked to temperature. The higher the temperature, the greater the rate of evaporation. That is true, but that's not the only method of evaporation. What they're finding now is that light affects it, because over 80 years, the climate scientists were puzzled why clouds would absorb more sunlight than physics would allow. And it just puzzled them. So now they're finding out with this evaporation rate caused by the light, now this makes sense, because now it's switching over. This is being exhausted, and the only thing they were measuring was what was being absorbed. So they're going, why is it absorbing so much sunlight? Shouldn't do that. Well, that's because water's evaporating, so it's being replaced. That really threw everyone for a loop, and they were not expecting that. In fact, that's not what they were looking for. What they were looking for, they were just trying to find out why that happened. So this photomolecular effect, that they've coined this term, is now starting to explain certain things, and they're excited because this really closes a lot of knowledge gaps that we have. So this is a rabbit hole that they're going to be exploring for the next 10, 20 years, and things are still going to be unfolding as we go down this rabbit hole. What this is going to contribute to our knowledge is just amazing.
Yeah. And so we're tying, and you mentioned this, earlier, just trying to tie this in, because, man, I pulled up this paper after you sent me the email, and I was like, holy cow, there's no way I'm going to read this thing. There had all kinds of crazy little charts and graphs and pictures and things like that, trying to explain what they're getting at. But basically, they're shining different types of light into the water and seeing what happens. And what they're saying is they discovered that depending on what color light they shined on the water, they were getting different rates of evaporation. And I guess the green light was the most, at a certain angle, was the most the one that was causing the most evaporation. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. And And I think even there, you're going to start seeing layers and layers and layers come out. So
Yeah.
that's something that until they break it all down, we probably should not explore that,
Yeah.
because that's going to sound like science fiction.
Well, I have no problem with that. Talking about things like that on the podcast. So, but what was interesting is, and we were, as we always do, we were chatting before we hit record, is trying to find real world, like you can go outside and see examples of this. And the one example we were talking about, and you again you mentioned it briefly, was the sublimation examples where ice and snow disappear in a cold, dry day.
Yes.
So these were a couple things that I pulled up quickly. So ice or snow disappears on a cold day, a cold sunny day. So what we're saying, it skips the melting step and goes straight to water vapor. And I was like, okay, I don't pay attention that much, especially during the wintertime. It's just cold, right? Everybody's cold,
Yeah.
and you're not paying attention what's going on with the snow. But I thought this was interesting that pointed out, and it was the dry ice. Everybody goes and buys the dry ice for different reasons, but I always think people, you buy the dry ice and you want that smoking appearance to do, especially during like the Halloween time. People are putting it out for, it looks all spooky and everything. But I thought that was a really good example. Is like, there you go. You got ice and it's skipping the liquid step and going right to gas.
Yeah.
So I thought that was,
I like the frozen clothes on the clothesline.
Yeah.
Gradually drying. Yeah. Again, that's another example.
Yeah. I've never tried that. I don't know that one.
And ice cubes, if you have them in your freezer long enough, after a while, you take them out and they rattle because they've shrunk. And people go, why'd the ice shrink? Sublimation.
Right.
Now, it's much faster if it's in the sun. But again, that connection was made decades ago. And now only in 2023 did they make that connection with liquid water. So water in an ice form, that's been known. And I brought up the speculation about, well, wouldn't that happen with waters or liquids? And no, that can't happen. Yeah. Well, yes, it does.
Well, let's jump to concrete. Now let's see, what are the implications of this. So in the email you talked about RH testing. Do you want to hit on that and what you were saying in the email?
Yeah, RH testing. The surface of the concrete is a gradient. Top 3/4 of an inch to an inch of the concrete is a gradient. Even under carefully controlled laboratory studies, like what was done with the Texas Transportation Institute, they finally did something I'd been hoping to see some from these other labs. They did the compression value test on the concrete that was air cured and water cured. The water cure was 7 days, and both samples were within the spec of 4,000 psi. However, when they sliced off the top 1 inch of the concrete, even the water cure at 7 days was a full 20% weaker than the remainder of the concrete. But in a compression test, they measure the break. They don't measure any type of a crush or compression. They only measure the break. So that's an information gap that's always existed. Now, I don't know how to test for that. I can't give other than what Dr. Zollinger did, where he sliced off the top inch. And the concrete that was air cured was much weaker. I think it was 30% lower in compressive value. So we're dealing with something different, but it's all being treated as though it was monolithic. We can't do that. And as long as we keep treating it as monolithic, RH testing, which tests well into the body of the concrete, past the 1 inch gradient, it's measuring something that's not a concern with the surface activity. And the surface activity is where the weather and durability conditions really start creating problems. And recently, Australia, one of the universities is getting involved with this study. They're going to finally tackle why is precast concrete not as durable as it's supposed to be. And they don't know why. Well, actually, I think I do. Because they steam cure it. the warmer the concrete is when you cure it, the weaker it becomes overall. You really shortchange the durability. Concrete cured in cold weather ends up having a much greater durability, but it's not fast enough for the construction schedule. So we've actually torpedoed the durability for convenience. Now that we look at the sunlight and what it does to accelerate the evaporation rate, now we're figuring out, okay, there's another separation between laboratory studies and outdoor. The laboratory isn't exposed to sunlight. This activity doesn't exist in the laboratory, but it exists in the field. And the field results keep coming out different than the lab. And they keep doing the same thing over and over again because they can't figure it out. This is a missing link that is so important to concrete. I can't even emphasize how important this is.
Yeah. Just trying to think how we can, I guess, prove this. So I guess someone needs to, start doing these.
Yes, start doing the rabbit hole. Yeah.
Yeah. Start, I guess, making maybe slab panels or, samples or whatever, and put them outside and cover one up and leave another one exposed to sunlight.
Yeah, or get a full spectrum light where you start using it at different angles to find out where the maximum value of the evaporation rate is under that type of light. So, because I don't think that they did this all under sunlight. I think they did this with full spectrum lighting. Because I haven't seen the details of the study.
Right.
But I think that we could do that with concrete.
Well, again, just hitting on what you were saying before is then we're getting back to a lab study versus what we deal with, outside.
Yes.
Actual conditions. So to me, this study needs to be done outside.
I would think so too, because we can never duplicate kinetics in a laboratory. You can't do it. You're dealing with thermodynamics. You're dealing with a set amount of rules and influences. Outside, there is no set rules. It does what it does, and they'd have to do this in several areas of the country because it's going to be different. For example, Denver versus Southern California, or over in the Midwest and in Florida and Texas. Those are all going to be different.
Yeah, like everything else.
Yeah.
So you could do. Yeah, side by side samples. I guess cover one up. You got to make sure they're getting this, the same conditions.
Yes.
And then, you can measure surface cracking and curling and weight loss, right?
Yes, exactly.
Loss, yeah.
And with this increased evaporation, that would also increase the alkalinity, which reduces the relative humidity in the surface. And once the relative humidity drops below 85%, the cement formation becomes accelerating in a negative way where it becomes less and less efficient, because right around 80%, it's only about 10% of the cement formation efficiency as it would be at, say, 85 to 90%. So I think this has a lot to do with the surface of the concrete and reducing the RH well below 80% within the first few days. So even when you put a curing compound on there and you get that acceleration effect with the sunlight, I think this is, again, it's going to close an information gap that we have. Because why is well-cured concrete still suffering strength loss? Because it doesn't make any sense until you enter this in, and along with the concentration of sodium hydroxide. So we have sun, heat, and alkalinity increase. Those are your three elements that are going to interfere with the strength of the concrete and its durability.
Yeah, you mentioned internal curing again earlier, and this has got me thinking. Why is we've seen or heard good results with internal curing, but you're not protecting the surface when you're doing internal curing. So we're still saying there's going to be an issue with the top 3/4 of an inch.
There could be, but it's probably going to be minimized to more like 1/8 of an inch if you have internally cured concrete, because it's when you have internally cured concrete, you have water at least replacing the water that's evaporating. Without internal cure, we don't have a replacement. it's being consumed by the alkalinity that's lowering the RH and the cement formation. Cement formation just reduces the total amount. So,
because we're saying the nanocolloidal silica evenly disperses the water within the concrete better than if you just poured traditional concrete, right?
Well, kind of, yeah. It's well dispersed and has to be well dispersed because a colloidal silica has its own water. So when it reacts to the calcium hydroxide or whatever it's reacting with, it spins water off. So that's replacing the water that's being consumed in the other reactions. So it's a replacement. So you have basically a reservoir, and they found that out with absorptive aggregate. And they found you have soaked aggregate that's surface dry, you put it in, it really helps the curing process because it's giving water to the concrete. It's replacing the water that's being consumed by the cement formation. And the thing that's not being studied, and it just baffles me, they're not equating the alkalinity with the reduction in RH, even though it's pretty obvious. And I have over 3,000 tests and studies in my personal laboratory, and they all speculate when they get to the end, and they do not deal with the reduction of relative humidity in the concrete as caused by the increased alkalinity. Yet that is a given in chemistry. If you take 20% sodium hydroxide solution, it will bring the relative humidity down to 78%. Well, you don't get any cement formation. It stops. And if it goes to 40%, it goes down to around 60%. So basically, you got this dehydrated, desiccated concrete that still has water in it, but the water is not available to form cement. Mm-hmm. So the presence of water is not an indication that cement formation will occur. We have to get a little smarter with this. We have to really look at the relative humidity in the first 30 days. And that's not being looked at correctly. And it's in the top 1 inch of the concrete that we need to focus. Because I saw this diagram given by this RH company, and they're showing that the surface of the concrete was 74% relative humidity in a lab environment. I said, well, there's no cement formation. So even if it equals out later on, it doesn't make any difference. You have less cement, less density, more porosity in the top surface of the concrete. You showed that in your own study, and you're ignoring it.
Right.
They're ignoring the chemistry. Yeah. This is really helping to address the chemistry, what MIT did, because this is all chemistry. This is caused by sunlight. It created a chemical change.
So I guess just to circle back around this report, what are the big picture things we can take from it? So we assume isothermal, right?
Yes.
And what we're saying now, could be. Are we saying it is non-isothermal just based on the paper? Is the paper now the authority? I mean, how do we take this new information?
Well, the paper shows even more so that it's non-isothermal. Again, isothermal is a controlled condition. Now, we don't know what the sun's going to do, what the cloud cover is going to do, the angle of the sun when the concrete is placed. We don't know any of that stuff. We're now going in uncharted territory. Basically, there's a lot of this we're going to have to start from scratch. So I said about this rabbit hole.
Some of the curing techniques that we do now, I would think, would reflect the sunlight, right? So what are those that would protect the surface?
Well, it'd have to be pigmented. They have to be pigmented water or something. Yeah. Again, we don't know what that will do because we've never known until the last couple of years that this effect even existed. Well, I speculated it 20 years ago, but this wasn't known. So I don't know what it's going to do down the line because every time you change something, when you change one thing, you can change everything.
Right.
I don't know what it's going to do. I can speculate a little bit, but I don't know.
Yeah, I was just thinking some of the spray cure stuff when you put it down is, it's white. So to me, just trying to think simply, that would possibly. Well, I get again, we gotta test these.
Yeah, because we don't know what the light's doing to that. Because again, that has never been considered. Mm-hmm. So now, even though it's reflecting the light, but what it showed in that photomolecular effect is it didn't need to absorb the light to create this problem. So it didn't heat up. It didn't do any of this stuff. So it's doing things that weren't expected or anticipated.
Right.
So, yeah.
So if we speculated an ideal curing, just based on the numerous podcasts that we've done on internal curing. So if you were to take this and say this is legit, this is something that we need to consider protecting the concrete from sunlight. You either got to wait to pour your concrete till you got a roof over the top of it, which some projects you can do that, right? So you protect it from that. Or maybe you and I need to go out and come up with a pigmented cure and that dissipates. They already have dissipating cure, but you got to have one that the color goes away.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, within the last few months, I was presented with a problem job where they had bubbling in the epoxy, and it was months down the road. Well, it happened to be where there was a window and where the sunlight came in and hit the concrete. That's the only place the epoxy failed. It didn't fail anywhere else in the entire room, except for where the window allowed sunlight onto the concrete. This helps explain that. It's going, well, maybe we had moisture from here, maybe we had moisture from there. Well, this puts a new wrinkle in things, and I mean, people's heads are going to spin on this one.
Yeah, if they're paying attention, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you had to send it to me. I don't know who's paying it. Who do you think's paying attention to this?
Nobody.
Nobody.
Yeah. So what we have to do is if we just get one or two people to start asking questions, that's the kind of thing that grows. This will be a grassroots movement, basically, because there's a lot of science that's been out there for a long, long time that they're still ignoring. So this is just one more thing they're going to ignore.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the installers and the concrete people are being held accountable for this bullshit, excuse my French, and they're being held accountable, and there's nothing they can do about it. You can do everything right, and things can go wrong, and you have these influences that are being ignored and not being shared and not being compensated for as the installers get thrown under the bus.
Yeah.
This isn't a harmless situation, and ignoring it harms everybody. It harms the consumer, it harms the owner, it harms the installer. We need to really get on this.
We do. Calling Dr. Belkowitz.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking to him a lot about this, because maybe if they can introduce, say, like a white pigment into some of this surface colloidal silica that they put down, and the white pigment exhausts, that may correct this. It's very possible.
Yeah. Well, we got to test it.
Yeah.
Try it out.
Yeah.
All right. Another Concrete Bob mind-blowing episode. Always fun to bring you on and talk about chemistry, and today a little bit of physics, right? This is physics?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, especially since they found that the physics wasn't adequate to explain this. That really is, I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I brought it up around the dinner table last night.
Did you?
Yeah, it's fun to see what the kids start, they have no guardrails, right? When you're a kid, you think totally free. So when you bring up things like this, they're like, whoa, they start bringing up other things to reconsider. So, all right, Bob, thanks for doing another episode with me today. Appreciate it. As always, I will share Bob's contact information, so you reach out to him if you're having problems that you think Bob can help out with. And you can always reach out to me if you're not sure who to reach out to help you with your concrete problems. And yeah, Bob, thanks again.
All right. Thank you, Seth.
Yes, sir. And until next time, let's keep it concrete.
Okay.